Hey students, today is Tuesday. I'm recording this video after school because I didn't realize that I didn't have a video recorded for this lesson. So this is Unit 4, Lesson 1, Part 2, which is really about phobias and treatments and the practical application of classical conditioning. Remember, that was a picture of Ivan Pavlov, who is the forerunner of classical conditioning. Now, classical conditioning originated with Ivan Pavlov, who was not a psychiatrist. He's a medical doctor. He's not a psychologist. He stumbled upon the principles and the elements of classical conditioning, and here we are talking about him 100 years later. He won the Nobel Prize in 1904, I believe, for his groundbreaking research into learning, which, again, he just kind of stumbled upon. Here, we're going to look at, now, we already looked at the principles of classical conditioning. We've looked at the clinical and experimental trials of classical conditioning, mainly with Pavlov. And in this one, we talk really more about classical conditioning in everyday life and how it's used to treat disorders, mental illness, and such. So first off, uses of classical conditioning include treatments of phobias, of anxiety, which can be learned behavior. So I can learn to be fearful of snakes, spiders, heights, whatever it might be, and this becomes a phobia. Now, I haven't asked you what a phobia is, or maybe I do in a bell ringer, but a phobia is an irrational fear, and we're talking about not like, oh, I don't like bugs. No, we're talking about like anxious, hyperventilating, cannot move forward, if exposed to the stimulus. So it's important to know that a phobia is something that is irrational. Like, it's not rational for me to be fearful of sharks when I'm living in landlocked area right now. You know, I'm never going to be around sharks, so why would I fear them right now? Phobias sometimes have no answer. They have no cause. They're there, and they may have been learned. So that's the bottom line. How can we unlearn them? Using principles of classical conditioning. So where you can be conditioned, you can be unconditioned. One way of doing that is through flooding. Now, flooding is based on the principle of extinction. Extinction, you'll remember, is when we're no longer exposed to the stimulus, it does not elicit the same response. So extinction happens when we are continually, a person is exposed to the harmless stimulus until the fear responses to that stimulus are extinguished. So we flood that person with the stimulus as long as it's not going to create harm, and then they eventually the fear goes extinct. So you're afraid of spiders, we're going to dump spiders on your head. No, in a controlled environment, they would never do something like that. That's just silly. I just made that up. But a person who's afraid to swim, maybe you walk into the pool and then you're fine. You find out, oh, I can touch the bottom, I'm okay. And so you can start the process of learning to swim. Next is one way to reduce fears is to use a principle of classical conditioning known as systematic desensitization. So remember that classical conditioning is associative learning, and in this we can associate feelings of relaxation. People are taught relaxation techniques, and pair that with exposure to the fear-inducing event, and you'll be okay. So when I was talking about this one in class, I was saying I had a kid who's afraid of dogs. I'm going to teach him relaxation methods, deep breathing exercises, ways to get calm, tap into your inner peace-loving, hippie, dippy vibes, just get chill, and then we're going to bring in the dog. Slowly, we're going to bring the dog closer to you. Slowly over time, these relaxation and breathing techniques are going to keep your anxiety levels lower, which, by the way, anxiety is just an elevated stress response. It's your central nervous system saying, hey, prepare for danger. It's fight or flight action, okay? So central nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system is saying we're in danger, we're in danger, we're in danger. Well, with systematic desensitization, you're fighting that feeling by relaxation techniques, and then we move the dog closer. Here's a scary snake pictured here. You could even do it with snakes. And I always think about with this, Indiana Jones getting thrown into the snake pit. If you're harmless relaxation techniques and you're exposed to a lot of snakes at one time and continue to do that relaxation, you're gonna be okay. This is over a long period of time. If my door, let's pretend my door is an elevator, Day 1, you're going to stand on X number 3. Day 2, you're standing on X number 2. Day 3, you're standing on X number 1 while you're doing the relaxation techniques. Another use where you can be conditioned, you can be counter conditioned. A counter condition is kind of like the opposite. So fearful event, a pleasant stimulus is paired with a fearful event. So little Albert is afraid of furry animals. We're gonna feed that kid chocolate chip cookies, candy, whatever pleasant stimulus we can think of, while moving that rabbit closer. And now we are counteracting the fear of the rabbit with pleasant stimulus, and our attention is really diverted to the good feeling stuff than the bad feeling, and before long, you know, this kid's cuddling with the rabbit. Another practical use of classical conditioning, this is one of those classic experiments where it was first used. This was back in the late 30s, early 40s, I believe, was the bell and pad method. So this was an instrument to get children to stop wetting the bed. The scientists designed a sheet that was sensitive to water. It had a sensor, not water, to urine. It had a sensor in it, so whenever it got wet, it would ring a bell and wake the kid up. So then the kid would feel the sensation of a full bladder and say, oh, it's time for me to get up so I don't pee in the bed. So for this one, the unconditioned stimulus is the sound of the bell, which makes us wake up. So the conditioned response is noticing I wake up and I need to get up and use the bathroom. So conditioned stimulus becomes, rather than it being the bell, now the child is learning that the bladder tension, the painful bladder, is what needs to get up so that we can go to the bathroom. So conditioned response is to get up and go to the bathroom. Finally, Watson and little Albert. Now, John B. Watson and his partner, Rosalie Rayner, classically conditioned a baby to fear white furry objects, to fear animals, to fear lots of stuff. And this is a video, if I click this, of the story of little Albert. So I will click it, but I don't want to show you this video because the YouTubes, I'll get kicked off. But it's also loud and long, so I don't want to. Okay, well, it's not going to play anyway, so we'll just move on. In this classic experiment, not again, we'll update the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, the conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response. It is classic for a number of different reasons, and it's famous in psychology for a number of different reasons. Those reasons include, number one, Watson proved that fears can be learned. Number two, it's highly unethical. You wouldn't get away with teaching children to fear things today. Little Albert was an orphan. It's not like a 9-month-old child can give consent to be conditioned. So these are big no-nos. Watson also worked with one of his students and then skirted some ethical lines there too. So cover that later. Anyway, the classic parts of his experiment end with fear. So he conditioned this child to fear animals, and that's where the ethical dilemma is, because there was no unlearning, so we don't know if Albert would live the rest of his life fearing animals or not. These, listed at the bottom here, offering of mint, computer sound, holding out hand, are the results of Jim and Dwight's classical conditioning experiment, which I can't show you because YouTube will reprimand me for that. So we'll skip that and talk later about applying classical conditioning to everyday life. I hope by now I've given you enough examples to where you can say, oh, that's classical conditioning. Like, classical conditioning is biological responses. I love to talk about the allergy scenario because I didn't have to learn my allergies, they just showed up. The thunder, lightning. So lots of different ways. The PTSD, you guys brought that up today and that was a great example. And finally, it's not child abuse, it's classical conditioning. This is a picture of John B. Watson that goes down in psychology history. That's the end, and I will see you when I see ya.